MSNBC has now corrected the record, no longer claiming that it was a white male who was apprehended. That storyline is gone, but thank God they got Jamie Raskin on board, lunatic Democrat congressman from Maryland, who has decided that the real villain in all of this is gun owners and the Second Amendment. Well, just in the last several weeks, we've seen the governor of Pennsylvania, a Jewish American's mansion, firebombed by a radical left-wing anti-Israel nutjob. We also saw 2 people murdered at a Jewish event in Washington, D.C., one of them a Christian from Israel, one of them an American Jew, murdered in cold blood. They both happened to work at the Israel embassy. And now, this weekend, we saw a maniac with a makeshift blowtorch or a flamethrower, and Molotov cocktails trying to incinerate elderly Jewish people who were merely exercising their free speech to raise attention and awareness of the hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza. This was a horrific terror attack, and the FBI immediately came out and called it just that. Here's the press briefing from Boulder, Colorado.
I'm able to confirm there are 6 victims, ages 67 to 88. All of them have been transported to local hospitals. This attack happened at a regularly scheduled weekly peaceful event. Witnesses are reporting that the subject used a makeshift flamethrower and threw an incendiary device into the crowd. The suspect was heard to yell, "Free Palestine," during the attack. The subject has been identified as Mohammed Sabri Solomon, and he's 45 years old. The FBI is processing the crime scene in the subject vehicle and interviewing key witnesses. We're assisting Boulder Police in providing technical, analytic, and additional forensic resources. As a result of these preliminary facts, it is clear that this is a targeted act of violence, and the FBI is investigating this as an act of terrorism.
All right, so there's the FBI with some pretty important facts. Mohammed Sabri Solomon, targeted attack, regularly scheduled meetings, Molotov cocktails, incendiary devices, screaming "Free Palestine." He also screamed "End the Zionists." Free Palestine, by the way, is the exact same thing that the murderer was shouting when he was apprehended in Washington, D.C., after killing those 2 employees of the Israeli embassy at a Jewish event. That's also, by the way, the same thing that is constantly chanted by all those peaceful protesters on college campuses here in America, as those protests are funded by Middle Eastern countries who also fund terrorist organizations like Hamas. So it seems pretty clear exactly what's going on here, right? Well, not if you're the chief of police in Boulder, Colorado. After the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, and the deputy director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, and after members of the Justice Department all took to social media to characterize yesterday's event as an act of terror, this guy, the Boulder chief of police, decided that he was going to be a smartass.
FBI is already calling it a targeted terror attack. Would you also refer to it as a terror attack?
So I've been in contact with our local FBI multiple times. We are in contact with them here. We are not calling it a terror attack at this point. Again, it's way too early to speculate motive. I know there's a lot out there on social media, but I ask people just to give us a little bit of patience while we work through a really complex scene. A lot of witnesses were here. We've taken them to another location to debrief them and interview them. As we do that, I think the picture will become more clear. But it would be irresponsible for me to speculate on motive this early on. We're only a couple hours into this thing.
Yeah, all we know is this guy was speaking with a Middle Eastern accent and throwing Molotov cocktails at a bunch of defenseless elderly Jewish people who were there to raise awareness for the hostages being held by Hamas, and he was screaming "Free Palestine" and the Zionists. Way too premature for us to leap to any conclusions. Also, listen, I love cops. I respect the badge. I respect law enforcement. God bless y'all, okay? But I do sometimes have to judge a book by its cover. What the hell's going on with this dude? He's the chief of police. He's about to appear at a press conference. He's had a couple of hours to throw himself together, and he decides to go with the jeans and a tucked-in polo shirt with the embroidered badge look. What the hell is that? Also, did you note, again, not to judge a book by the cover, but I sort of fashion myself a quasi-expert in communication style. When I hear certain idiosyncratic vocal tics, it raises a red flag for me. Listen to how he answers the question. Just
So
listen.
we are in contact with our local FBI.
Oh, sorry. Let me start it right here.
Attack, would you also refer to it as a terror attack?
So I've been in contact with our local FBI.
Yeah, that's it right there. Did you catch it? It's what your teenage daughter does when you ask her a question about whether she's going out with friends tonight and whether there are going to be boys there. So I was going to go out with my friends, and what's the so? Well, you're a chief of police for a major city. I mean, I know it's Boulder, and y'all just smoke bongs now. What the hell has happened to Colorado? But that's how you answer when all the eyes of the world are on you at a terror attack here in the homeland of the United States of America with Molotov cocktails, and your answer to a question is, so let me give you that. I'm going to tell you. Tucked in polo shirt with an embroidered badge. Tucked into jeans with a belt. Okay. Meanwhile, CNN decided to take this part of the narrative up. Now, understand something. If I can repeat it again, you just had a dude screaming like a maniac, free Palestine, and throw Molotov cocktails and use a makeshift flamethrower on innocent elderly Jews. This is a terror attack, a racist attack, a hate crime. CNN, though, in most of their coverage yesterday, decided to focus on the real enemy, the FBI, because it's being headed by Kash Patel.
Local authorities are saying one thing, and the FBI is saying something slightly different.
Yeah, that's never a great start. I think that the press conference that we saw, one thing was abundantly clear, is the local authorities, and I'm not sure we got the name of that person who was speaking. He seems to be a chief or somebody in charge there.
Same, yes.
Yeah, he is really very, very careful. And I think that's the right approach at this point. They don't have a clear idea.
Yeah, that's the right approach. That's Andy McCabe, by the way. I always take his advice on proper law enforcement, considering the fact that he pulled search warrants and FISA warrants to spy on an innocent American named Carter Page. He ramped up and basically oversaw the entire Russian collusion hoax. And oh, by the way, he was drummed out of the FBI in shame because he leaked anonymously to the media, but not so anonymously because it was discovered that he was the leaker. But yeah, that's Andy McCabe. By the way, Chief of Police of Boulder, Colorado, this is why we don't put out conflicting statements in law enforcement. If the FBI has already called it a terror attack, you, sir, stepped down and defer to the federal law enforcement authorities. That's how it's supposed to do. They actually supersede your authority there at this moment. But because Mr. Okay, well, so let me tell you what I think about this crime, because he decided to step out there and say, yeah, it would be way premature. He looks like a fool, but he also fuels this crap on CNN. More?
Chief comes out and says, we don't have 2 + 2 = 4 yet. In other words, this is obviously an anti-Semitic attack, and the victims were obviously part of that group. Therefore, we're not calling it terrorism. It adds a lot of it's not good for the community. It's not good for the potentially targeted community. It makes law enforcement look disorganized, and it makes the FBI look so juvenile. Like, why are you getting ahead of the police chief who says, I don't know what this is? It's
so understand the take here. May I repeat myself one more time? Crazed maniac, makeshift flamethrower, Molotov cocktails, incendiary devices, setting aflame elderly Jewish people who are drawing attention to the hostages held by Hamas. He's screaming, end the Zionists and free Palestine. And according to this CNN law enforcement expert, it's the FBI who looks bad for calling this what it obviously is. They're not analysts. They're not experts. They're partisans. And in live television, while CNN is supposed to be in the business of delivering facts, news, and information to their viewers, what a joke that is, they're not giving you analysis. They're taking sides. They're using this as a political weapon against people that they don't like. And if you're watching CNN, you think that the FBI is crazy and jumping to conclusions, calling it a terrorist attack, instead of actually knowing and hearing the facts, which of course it's a terrorist attack. And I already showed you the FBI field representative there giving the press conference saying, based on everything we know, we are calling this a targeted act of terror. But, oh, by all means, Mr. Polo shirt with an embroidered badge tucked in his blue jeans, who's now the chief of police of Boulder, he supersedes all of that. I wish that were the extent of the atrocious media coverage of this horrific event, but frankly, we're just scratching the surface. Here's how CNN wrote up this story. Check this out. A man reportedly set people on fire. Reportedly. I mean, we've got the charred bodies sitting on the sidewalk, CNN. A man reportedly set people on fire in Boulder, Colorado, leaving multiple individuals injured. The city's police chief said as people gathered for a peaceful pro-Israeli demonstration. Do you see that? Zoom in, Kevin. They put scare quotes around the word peaceful. In other words, CNN couldn't objectively tell you that it was a peaceful demonstration, excuse me. You can't just let that adjective and modifier sit there without some sort of, well, we're not going to go out on a limb and say that it was peaceful. Other people described it as peaceful. So we'll call it a peaceful demonstration, as if any demonstration in favor of Israel can ever actually be peaceful. Are you freaking kidding me? They're the victims here. They're the ones who were burned. Suspect is in custody and police are investigating what FBI officials immediately called a targeted terror attack, though the local authorities said it was way too early to find the attack. All right, and then the man threw bottles that apparently contained flammable liquid that hit the ground, exploded in flames. Multiple law enforcement officials briefed on the investigation told CNN. Oh, and here's the quote from the chief of police. When we arrived, we encountered multiple victims with injuries consistent with burns. Do you see what's left out of here? They've got all the scare quotes about things like peaceful. They do call it a pro-Israeli demonstration, but did you notice one thing left out about the incinerated, burned, charred victims who were lying on the pavement in a pool of their own blood, feeling the agony of being burned? The fact that they're Jewish. The fact that they're Jewish never makes it onto CNN's report. Gee, I wonder why. That no one needs to know about that. You know, we don't want to anger anybody who's taken up residence in the quad at Harvard or at MIT. BBC was no better. BBC was no better. Multiple people are being treated for burn injuries after a man started setting people on fire at a mall in Boulder. Officers say the suspect has been taken into custody and the injuries range from very serious to more minor. A pro-Israeli peaceful demonstration, at least they didn't put scare quotes around peaceful, was underway when the attack happened. The group meets regularly for a walk to remember the hostages taken by Hamas. I'm sorry. Anything more you can tell us about the group? It's just a random group of people. Why do they not identify them as Jewish? Why go? I mean, it's like they're going out of their way to ignore that fact. Well, we don't want anyone to jump to conclusions about the suspect. More from, you're going to love this one from BBC. See the timestamp here? 2:11 is the timestamp on this one. This is one of those scrolling pages where they give you updates as news information comes in, and they put a timestamp on it, which is really useful, okay? At 2:11, we learn that police are examining whether the demonstration was targeted, but have yet to confirm a link, right? So, gosh, we're not sure. The guy screaming "Free Palestine" and "End the Zionists," throwing a Molotov cocktail and screaming in a Middle Eastern accent may or may not have targeted the group that was trying to raise awareness of the hostages. We're not sure. We haven't confirmed a link yet at 2:11. But get this. 8 minutes earlier at 2:03, 8 minutes before that, they've got the Attorney General of Colorado saying, from what we know, this attack appears to be a hate crime, given the group that was targeted. So BBC at 2:03 quotes the Attorney General of Colorado saying, yeah, we're pretty sure this is a targeted hate crime based on everything we know. And then 8 minutes later, they say, yeah, we're not sure. Police have yet to confirm it. All right. All of this pales in comparison to NBC, though. NBC News. You got to twist yourself into a pretzel. You have to contort yourself like you work for Cirque du Soleil or something to write this headline. Gee, how can we describe the Jewish people who every week meet for this peaceful walk to raise awareness to the hostages being held by Hamas? Is there any word that we can use to describe them? Well, they are Jewish. You don't want to say that. You don't want to say that. So let's instead call them advocates for Israeli hostages in Gaza. There. You know, Andrew Breitbart taught me how to write headlines back when I worked for him years ago at the Breitbart sites back in the original days. And he would say, and he learned from Matt Drudge, a master at headline writing. It's like, write the headline and then eliminate every word that is unnecessary. Make it as tight and as pithy as possible. Any word that isn't necessary, eliminate it or find a better way, shorter, more concise way to say it. So, you know, you could have said Jews injured in fire attack in Colorado, although fire attack is kind of a funny way to put it. You know, that would have made a real nice, tight and informative headline that was factual. Jews targeted and injured in terrorist attack in Colorado would have been a really good way to write it. No. NBC News has to come up with how many thesauruses did they break by coming up with this one? They're not Jews. They're advocates for Israeli hostages in Gaza. Honestly, you can't hate these shameless liars enough. Meanwhile, one photojournalist captured the perfect representation of the left in America as of today. Your shirtless maniac terrorist wielding Molotov cocktails to kill the peaceful 88-year-old woman trying to raise awareness because she took never again seriously. But the state of Colorado, they have their priorities in line, baby. Make sure that trans flag is flying proudly on your building, because that's what we really care about. Happy Pride Month, everybody. Meanwhile, MSNBC, we're not going to let them off the hook. Here's how they described the suspect after he was apprehended.
As far as the investigation itself, we're still trying to verify and confirm some video, but it appears to show a significant portion of the incident as it happened. There's an individual that's taken into custody. He's a white male. Whether or not that's the person that police ultimately arrested and will ultimately charge in this crime, a bit of a question at this time, but that's just what we've seen so far.
He's a white male, according to MSNBC, which probably is the reason that they were covering it. You know, white male, Molotov cocktails on innocent Jews. Maybe it's a MAGA thing. Let's stay with it 24/7. Oh, but then they got the sad news. Sorry about that. Not a white male, actually Middle Eastern descent. Egyptian, possibly Arab, and even more so, Bill Maloogian at Fox News got this confirmed little detail. 3 senior DHS sources tell Fox that the Boulder terror suspect is an Egyptian national in the U.S. illegally as a visa overstay. Entered the U.S. during the Biden administration. Mohammed Sabri Solomon arrived at LAX 8/27/22 on a B1, B2 non-immigrant visa. That means you're a tourist. You're here to see Disneyland and Universal Studios. Non-immigrant visa with an authorized stay through February of 23. He overstayed, never left, now an illegal immigrant. Filed some sort of claim, potentially an asylum claim, and on March of 23, under the Biden administration, gave him a work authorization, but that expired March of this year. So here's the timeline as Fox broke it down. Who was president during all of this? August 27th, 2022, entered via LAX as a tourist, just here for Mickey Mouse. A month later, files, we don't know this, potentially seeking asylum, but we don't know that that's what the claim was. February of 23, he was authorized to, his authorization on his tourist visa expired. So now he's an illegal. A month later, the Biden administration gave him a work authorization. Why on earth did they do that? And what kind of vetting and investigation process did they have? And then 2 months ago, that expired too. So he's illegally in the country twice now. And now he decides to kill as many Jews as possible. So MSNBC got it wrong. Not a white male. Turns out Middle Eastern descent. Turns out there's probably a lot there to learn about Mr. Free Palestine and end the Zionists. I'm going to murder Jews, defenseless Jews in Boulder, Colorado, who are octogenarian because they're kind of upset that these hostages are still being held by Hamas. But if you flip over to MSNBC this morning, MSNBC has now corrected the record. No longer claiming that it was a white male who was apprehended. That storyline is gone. But thank God they got Jamie Raskin on board, lunatic Democrat congressman from Maryland, who has decided that the real villain in all of this is gun owners and the Second Amendment.
Across the country, we are still in the midst of a gun violence epidemic. So we need to be acting with due concern for human life. I mean, this is why, of course, we have been fighting for a universal violent criminal background check. We are for a ban on military-style assault weapons in the country. Our lax gun laws are a danger to everybody in America, and that's something that we can act with some legislative determination to turn around. But people have got to lead their lives, and people need to act with courage, but it is the responsibility of government to try to keep everybody safe from random arbitrary violence and bigotry and hate motivated crimes.
And that's why we need to ban guns, because this is a clear indication that we have too many lax gun laws in this country. You can't make this up. If you were parodying these people, you could not make it up. No one would believe your comedic script that you've written. This dirtbag terrorist actually was in the country illegally. He couldn't obtain a firearm legally himself, although Lord knows in a Democrat city, there's plenty of ways to buy an illegal gun from the inner city. But instead, he decided to make his own flamethrower and Molotov cocktails. And here comes Jamie Raskin to the rescue to say, this is why we need to ban guns. Dude, if all of those peaceful protesters trying to raise awareness for the hostages held by Hamas were all packing heat, this would have been over real fast. But Boulder and the state of Colorado was run by Democrats. This rugged Western state that used to be all about American individualism and our freedoms and liberties. Try getting a gun there to protect yourself. The lesson here, Jamie, is not to get rid of guns. The lesson is that every Jew in America should be packing heat to defend themselves, because Jamie Raskin ain't coming to your rescue. CNN, by the way, this morning found out that they had Jamie Raskin claiming that this was a gun control issue. And they said, oh, we can't let MSNBC beat us in the stupid race. So quick, get out there. Say something even stupider. And their anchor did just that.
Look, this is the United States of America, where everyone is guaranteed safety, no matter your color, race, your creed. And so, of course, just a sad event as we learn more details and work to learn exactly what unfolded there in Boulder. We are getting more and more details. Please stay with us.
Yeah, we're definitely going to stay with you after that genius take. Yeah, every single American is guaranteed their safety. Well, I'll sleep better tonight knowing that. Especially if you live in the south side of Chicago, or maybe in Baltimore, or in Detroit, or San Francisco, or LA, or DC, or New York, or I don't know. I've run out of cities that I can name off the top of my head, but just all the ones that are run by Democrats right now. Trust me, that guarantee of safety doesn't really play itself out on a regular basis, CNN. Although she's partly right. Especially if this is a response to Jamie Raskin's call to eliminate the Second Amendment. Because if there's anything that comes close in our country to a guarantee of safety, or maybe even a constitutional right to safety, it would in fact be that Second Amendment. And after the events this weekend and the response of the media and Democrats, even sadly those in law enforcement, I suggest personally that you all investigate that Second Amendment right you have and, well, make your decisions appropriately.